How many of you installed the dev tools? Xcode. Hey, just about everybody. And one latecomer. How many of you have 7.3 installed? Than the one from this week that you got the email about? Some of you. Okay. How many have you done any software development at all before? Most of you. Kevin, you don't count. How many of you have tried to do or done any iOS development? Was it with web? Was it with native?
It was native, but it was back in Xcode 4.
Oh, the old rough days. Okay. This is intended for you to be able to pull up Xcode and kind of follow along. We've got a Git repo that you'll be able to grab, and if you want, cheat. Hopefully you'll walk out of here with a working, very simple app, and I mean simple, on your device if you've got everything installed. So to start off, with iOS, everything's basically controlled by view controllers, and everything is basically a view, right? Not that I've worked on the Facebook app, but most of the time, most apps have a login view, right? And your view is the big rectangle. You've probably got an image view for the icon for Facebook, and then some text fields and a button, right? And generally, that's one view controller, and the view controller manages all of the little bits of the UI. You can get a little bit more intricate with that and have one view controller managing many views, or you can even go and take a view controller and have it manage other view controllers with parent-child relationships. On top of that, view controllers, you control the classes so that you can say your password view controller inherits from a normal UI view controller, but a list of accounts that they could select from, or a list of, in Facebook's terms, posts would be listed from a table view. That would be a UI table view controller. It can get kind of complicated. We're not going to get into any of that. So, to start off, since some of you have, do you all have iPhones? Or are there some Android people here or other? Oh, really? Others? What are you doing here? The first trick is, well, let me put that back up. Pull up a web browser and hit this URL down here. What we're going to take a quick spin through, it's called UI Catalog. Apple puts out some pretty good sample code, and this one instance, what they do is I think they have a lot of their interns go and write this stuff. So it's not always the greatest code, but it's free, and it lets you not only build and run it, but you can dig into it and see how they do things. The great thing about the UI Catalog app, or the project, is that they try to update it with new UI controls. And so you can put something like this on your phone, play with the different controls, change them, and then even if you're working with a designer or someone who doesn't have much mobile experience, you can fire this on your phone up and say, look, this is how this control works. Everybody got it? Were you able to download it? That one. When you grab it, or when you go to that URL, it will look something like this when you open it up. Is that even readable? to most of you? What about that? Okay. We're not necessarily going to look through the source of this thing. But when you download it, they now provide two versions, one in Objective-C and one Swift, and we're just going to look at the Swift one. Grab it, build it, and run it in your simulator. Not that one, Xcode. That one. We'll see how this looks on the screen. If, when you run the simulator, did any of you download it, and are you able to open it and run it? Still downloading, or got it? All right. When you build it and run it, sometimes depending on if your machine has Retina or not, you can hit Command 1, 2, or 3 to zoom it. So for this, I had this 3. But anyway, so once you fire it up, you've got a nice little scroll view, or it's actually probably a table view, of UIK controls, right? Go through them if you're not familiar with them. It's useful in that it's useful to work with graphics designers. It's also useful if you are trying to do something with a control you can't get it to run. You can grab this and instead of having to set up a whole new project, go through and change whatever you want and experiment. And you're not really burning as much time as you would with a whole new project. Oh, yeah, activity indicators. All right. So next, let's go back to the deck. Did you get it running?
No, it's saying it's not close to our machine. I mean, I'm running 7.2. I don't know if that's the issue. It shouldn't be the issue.
For that, it probably shouldn't. You should be able to run 7.2. I mean, 7.3 just came out.
Right.
But a lot of something like that would be so generic, version agnostic, that it would probably run in 7.1, even 7.0. Probably not less than that. But
I'm in the last version as well, and the build is failing.
you're in 7.2 and it's failing?
Yeah, 7.2.1.
Did you go download it fresh?
Yeah, I just downloaded.
Huh. Oh, all right. After this, we can
Yeah, that's fine.
check it out. All right. Whoop. There we are. So let's go back to views for a bit. The basic thing with UIKit and iOS is everything's in a view. You can put buttons in a view. The view controllers manage the views. But a view is basically a rectangle container in simplest terms. The origin is up at the top left, and it has a height and a width. And that is what's known as the coordinate system in UIKit. It's pretty simple. However, something like Mac development, it's reverse. If you dig farther deeper into what's behind views, which is layers, the coordinates can be different, and behind that is OpenGL, and that can be different. So it can get kind of complicated. If we have time, we'll venture into a little bit of that. With iOS and apps, like we were showing you the view controller that had that form, if you think of this as being the view controller and having an image view, the common way to lay things out is with a system called auto layout. And Auto layout, it's termed as a constraint-based layout system. So what that means is you need to give it enough information to be able to deduce where and how to display an object, such as an image view. So in this example, we might give it did I lose the mouse? A height and a width, right? Which is good enough for the image view itself, but the auto layout system wouldn't have any way to know where to put it. So you could say, I want to take that image and center it, and I want to put it at a specific distance from the top. That would give it the X, Y of placement, and then the height and width, and then it would be good to go. So let's give something like that a quick shot. Oh, this is going to be not fun on a small screen. First things first, we need an image. And I don't know that I put one in here. No, I didn't. So have a new Xcode project, right? Nothing spectacular about it. Add an image to it in the image assets, and then pull up the storyboard. And there's a view controller. And they even, on a new project, it even calls it view controller. Simple enough, right? And on the left-hand side in Xcode, you get a project browser. Then you get detail. And then on the far left, or I'm sorry, right, is your objects. So we want a image view on here. Drag it on. And if you build and run this, you get, anybody guess? It'd help if the simulator was up there. You get absolutely nothing. The view's there, the image view's there, but you don't have an image for it yet. So it has really nothing to show. So now we'll tell it to put the beach there. And we'll give it a, let's say, height or width, and we'll make it a square, all right? So now if you build and run, and all I'm doing is hitting Command R. You can hit Command B to run or build, but if you hit Command R, run. So now, great, we've got an image view there, but we didn't tell it any auto layout constraints. So it doesn't know where to show it. It doesn't even know where to render it. So the trick with that, and this whole interface of Xcode is called Interface Builder. It's sometimes will leave you frustrated and wanting, but it has improved over the years. So this little button down here is where we'll add some constraints. But first you have to pick the item. So pick that and constrain the height and the width. And now we have, and then you can see the constraints over here. But now you're getting a nice little red button, and the red button is going to tell you that we haven't given it enough information to be able to tell where to position the thing. We can go, and if you control drag from it to the parent view, you could say equal widths. We're going to, for the moment, do center horizontally and center vertically. And now run. Ta-da, magic. Now we'll talk a little bit about movement. So you've got a view controller here that's centered, and actually we're going to take the centering off because we want to be able to control where this thing's going to go. So we'll keep the height and we'll keep the width, but we'll select the constraint, and delete them out, and sometimes that doesn't work quite well. So we'll take this and you or click on the image, control drag, and we want it centered horizontally, but we want a constraint that's going to go from the top of the image to the top there. So you can use this nice little handy button again, and there's a constraint. And if you go back to the slide, that's kind of what we were showing. And we'll let it update. So now if we build and run again, it's still in the center there, but it's not quite centered vertically. What we want to do is move the image, right? And if you think about this, a lot of apps have movement in them. This is a very common way to do it, because what we're going to do is take this top constraint, come on, that has a constant value, and we're going to change the value. So we have an image view that's in a view controller, and the view controller has a class, and that class is created by Xcode at the very beginning for you. What we add is a outlet that lets the view controller access the image view, that lets the view controller have a instance variable that represents the top image constraint, right? And the way to do that is, well, first of all, you can control drag from the view controller to the image, and that goes and links it. And then if you look at the inspector of the image over here on the outlets, it's connected. So now when that view controller runs in that class, that lets me manipulate. That's the pointer from the class to the image view. That lets me do anything with it. I can change its properties. I can make it hidden, whatever I want. The trickier thing here is the top constraint, because just finding it sometimes can be, if you have thousands of them over here, can be a bear. So we're going to drag from the view controller and connect another outlet there. And now, so both of these are connected. If you don't do that and you declare a outlet in your class and you build and run, it will complain when it tries to access it, because it won't exist to it. You've got to connect it. Right. So back in that slide where we were talking about the frames and origin, height, and width, right? What we're going to do is when this view controller knows that it did appear on the screen, we're going to let it animate the frame, right? And the first thing we'll do is take the image view and take its rectangle and alter the width, or the width by 50. And if you, or offset the x-coordinate. When you're in Xcode, I don't know if you guys are trying to type along with this. I wouldn't recommend it. We'll get to the part where you're doing the typing when we actually make the app. But a handy thing in Xcode is when you're looking at something, let's say you don't know exactly what CG rect offset does. If you option click, then you get a nice little info panel about it. Sometimes those will have direct links to sample code, sometimes they don't. Well, let's build it, run it, and see what it does. Ooh.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So that animate with duration, that 10 is like seconds, I assume?
Yes.
And what is the 50?
Like what units? Is that in pixels?
Pixels.
Okay.
So yeah, if we knock this down, much faster, right? Now that's animating the frame. Realistically, Apple doesn't really want you to do that unless you absolutely have to, because they want you to use the layout system to do such a thing. So if you recall when we were looking at the storyboard, we created this top constraint, right? And then we created a outlet to it so that wrong one. So that the view controller has an instance variable to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the constraint, the constraint's constant value from whatever it was to, well, I guess we're going to go with 200. And then in the animation, we're going to tell the auto layout engine that it needs to lay out again. And when that happens, a little bit different. And we'll just change this to 50 and we'll speed this up so it's not so annoying. So because the constraint that we're changing is from the image view's top to the view's top, you're changing the amount, it deprecated it so it decreased it, so it shrank. So it pulls the image view up. And therein lies your Wizardry of iOS Animations, Volume 1. Have any of you done any of this before?
No.
Cool. All right. That's a very basic example. You can start getting into, if you go to the UI view in the animation class and start looking through it, there are many different ways to animate a UI view. You can do with duration, you can do delay, you can start adding springing, and that gives the kind of the bounciness, the rate. You can change the linear motion of it, the easing in and out, all sorts of stuff. And hopefully this week, after you grab some of the other code, you'll experiment with that. So back to the deck. Who wants to build an app? I can tell you're all excited. Any of you remember Hot or Not?
Yep.
Okay. What we're going to do is an app that is very similar to that, but with bunny rabbits, because it's Easter. And then what we're going to do is do some logical unit tests for it so that you can check your code. And then we're going to do some UI tests. Because if you don't test your code, well, then you get more bugs and it's worthless. So the idea of this is a image view, right? And you all saw what it looks like to lay out an image view on a view controller. And then two buttons. One button for cute and the other one for, well, maybe not so much. And I did warn you that this app was going to be super simple. So grab this. You're going to want to open up your terminal app. Well, what you should see is an Xcode project, right? With a blank storyboard, a couple more classes that we'll talk about here in a second. The main reason why I set this project up a little bit ahead of time was because of all the images. I had to go find them and then get them added. So I figured the easiest way for you to get them is to download them in the Git repo a little bit ahead of time. So let me switch branches here for a second. And, oh, come on. talk about this. So you've got a storyboard that's blank. We need an image view, and we need some buttons in there. So I'll just clear this stuff out of here and add some. Over on the left, so almost, there we go. Grab an image view, very similar to what we did before, except now if you want to, you can go and put a bunny rabbit in there as a placeholder, right? And make the thing a little bit larger. Now, we drug a image view on there, but what we really need is a couple more buttons. So you can either go searching through that panel for a button, or you can cheat and type, right? And then grab a button and drag it on. And since we know that we need 2 buttons, grab a button, drag it on. Double tap on one of them and change the title. Ta-da, there's your UI, and it's done, right? Not quite. If you build and run this, Xcode is going to throw a fit because you've not told it where it needs to lay anything out. So let's give the image view a height and a width. And then same thing, control drag up to give it some vertical, and then horizontal center. So now it's cool because you don't have any red lines and you've got positioning. You can go and take this button and let's resize that, right? So that it's a reasonable size to tap on. And we'll make them the same size in a second, 145 and 145, right? If you go back to what we wanted it to look like, two buttons underneath. We don't have a picky graphic designer who's given us a PSD who says, it's got to be 8.5 pixels. So we're just going to give it some really generic alignment here. If you control drag from the button on the left to this, that gives you vertical spacing, right? And then if you control drag from this button to the other button, that gives you horizontal spacing. For both of the buttons, if you were to give it a stock height and width, when you tap on them, you're almost there. Xcode's still going to complain that the buttons don't have any constraints for Y. Oh wait, the no button it's complaining about Y, and actually both of them. The no button, it's complaining about it doesn't know how to render its height or its where the vertical and horizontal is. And since you've already taken this button and positioned it vertical here, you can just take that one and center vertically to that. Now it knows. No, so now you're telling it this button will always be centered there. And same thing then, you've got horizontal spacing. What's it complaining about?
Can you explain that again, the centering?
Sure, let me back up. Actually, what we'll do is we'll just kill all the constraints on both of them. So right now, if I take this button and this button, neither of them have any constraints. We know that in the UI, these are both vertically even. So you can take this and say center vertically to this, and there's your alignment. So they'll always be aligned, right? Then if I know that I want that spacing, there's my horizontal spacing between the two right there. Does that make sense? I've got to put back the height and the width. Actually, what I can do, I can even cheat with that. Since I know that I want both buttons to be the same, I can give this one a height and width, but then I can control drag from this one and say equal heights, or equal width and equal height, right? So now it's got the height and the width for both of them. It knows the positioning for this button relative to this button, but it doesn't yet know where to place these. So I can align this to the image view, and because this is aligned to this and aligned to that, it knows where to put them vertically, right? But it still doesn't know where to put them horizontally. So I can take the one button and I can say center horizontally in container. Now it's going to crab that it's off by 62. Though the reason is, well, if you look, I mean, it is. But since we can take that constraint and change its constant, as long as I can find it, we can offset it. Because you really don't want that button to be centered. You want it off-centered, right? If it were centered, it would be there, and its corresponding button would be way too far to the right. But since you're taking this and telling it to center, and then you're taking that center constraint and giving it a negative value, it pulls it back to the left. And since this button has a leading constraint to the cute button, it pulls it left also. And maybe my numbers are a little bit off here, but the idea is that you would either do the math to know those values to get both items to center, or just keep editing the value and build and run until you get it to position the way you want it to. Well, let's see what it's crabbing about now. Misplaced views, expected 309. Oh, okay. This is common with auto layout. And just so you know, auto layout is not the easiest thing to get a handle on. When you're doing things that are very simple, like a hello world, it can seem easy, but you can start relating two objects together. You can start doing aspect ratio between two layouts. You can even do prioritization of constraints. So you can give one constraint a priority of 1,000, and then a very similar constraint a priority of, let's say, 9,099. And depending on, and so when the system goes to lay it out, it'll start with the highest priority constraint, and then if it can't do that constraint, but it can do the one that's 999, well, then it will. We're not going to venture there. That's for a different, maybe a follow-up talk. So Xcode is complaining that it doesn't know what to do. Oh, it thinks it knows what to do with the second button. It's horizontal. One way that you can let it fix that is to update frames. And now it's not complaining. And basically what had happened is we gave it a constraint, but the view's frame, remember we talked about that earlier, where the origin was here and then the width and then the height didn't match the constraint that we gave it. And so it gave us a nice little yellow warning. And that's your layout. Any of you got that far with it? Did you even try that, or were you more just watching?
My buttons are
Okay.
They don't have a border around them? I don't know if I used the wrong type.
The border is if you select one and you go, you can change this from system to like custom
Okay.
and get rid of it. Well, if you do custom, then you're on your own for the actual styling of it. But this is where you would manipulate all of the properties. This is where you would, well, you could double click it to give it text. But if you select over here, wait, yep, all right, that's placement. And this is more styling. So let's see here, if we change the background color to it, we don't want the background to be an image. Where is background color? There it is. So red, right?
Okay.
Now, we talked about a little bit earlier about outlets and whatnot. You should have a view controller class, I think. Maybe? No? Try doing this at that where you checked out that code. If you don't want to lose everything that you've done, if you've done anything here, if you made any changes, you can back it up. Otherwise, if you do this, you're going to check out a further branch, which is going to have more classes in it. Ready? So go to the command line and type reset. Is it hard? And then what was the branch command? I can never remember git. You want to type this, but that there, all right? I figure they don't want to watch me type. Anybody got it? It should be quick. It shouldn't have to pull down anything down from GitHub.
Got an error. Yeah, but did you intend to check out?
I don't think it's a tag, I think it's just a branch.
Oh, okay. Do this then. That's what you want, I believe. All right, because then if you do git branch, it should show step 2.
I have a view controller now, so I can
Okay. Anybody else? Good, stuck. When we talked about the view controller class, right? We talked about the instance variables that let you manage these things. And these instance variables would let me say on view did appear, super view did appear animated, would let me possibly say something like background color, UI color, blue color, right? And if I build and run this, if those outlets are connected, oh, what's that? Anybody know what that means? What we're really looking at is this. Unexpectedly found nil. What that is telling you is that it's trying to grab the button and set the background color, and it can't because the button is nil. So, all right, simple enough, right? Why is the variable nil? Well, oh, shoot. That's why. Hold on. It's empty. I must have screwed up the commits for this. All right, give me a second. Button 1, button 2. Oh, heck.
How did you filter to find the image view in that list?
Down here
Yeah.
at the bottom, just type image.
Type in that box. Okay.
All right. So the reason why that thing is crabbing is this. I didn't have any buttons. But even so now I have buttons on there. If I build and run, it's still going to error out. Same thing. And the reason why it errors out is I never set the outlets for the items. So if I control drag from the view controller to the button, now I get the suggestions for how to link them. So now I've got the ugly button, and now I've got a bunny image view, right? Now if I build and run, I've given Xcode enough information to know that, aha, I've got a button, and what did we set? We set the background color to blue. If I want the opposite, let me add some rules here real quick, otherwise the layout's going to get goofy and you're going to be wondering what's going on. Sometimes you can go and do something like this too. And for the time being, we'll try. Add missing constraints. Ta-da, done. Xcode did it all for me. Sometimes you can get lucky with that, and we'll build and run and see what it does. Most of the time, you can't. Oh, wait. Yeah.
What do you do if the control drag from the view controller is not working too?
Okay. If you look at your view controller class, do you have these up in there? If not, you can type them in.
So mine is red, and when I open it, there's nothing there.
Then this. You don't have the right thing checked out. If you pop over to your terminal app, type git branch and hit enter.
Yeah, I'm
You
sitting
get
on
step 2.
Yep.
Okay. Try this git reset, right? And then git checkout master.
And then go back over there.
Yeah, that will actually give you the whole final app, which is okay. You would just have to delete some things out. Do you have anything in here now? Does it look like this?
It's yelling at me that branch 2 already exists.
No, if you do this,
Did that.
and you got a branches up to date,
I want about 3 branch traces, is that correct? Step 1, step 2?
there's quite a few up on the remote. But right now you should, well, you start off with master, and then you should have step 1 and 2.
Bill, is yours red too?
It was until I just went to master. So view controller was empty for me as well. Off of step 2. It was empty file, actually the file did not physically exist on my disk. So I checked them.
All right, then we'll do this a little bit differently.
But it doesn't
If everyone does this, that'll give you the final version. And we'll just kind of work backwards a little bit. That way, at least you're guaranteed to be able to build and run. You won't watch me type so much. Got it?
A red animal, yeah. So we just draw that split.
Anybody stuck? Good.
I went to the pre-baked version. Yeah, the cooking show went to the end.
I debated whether or not to just start off with the final thing and kind of backtrack. But I thought maybe, I've never done this before, so I thought, well, okay, maybe people can just type along. And then Friday night I was sitting there after work and I thought, no way, I've got to do something more. And I guessed right. I should have just started off with master and talked about what I did, but learning process. Okay, got it? If you've got that master checkout, you should be able to build, right? And when you build, it should say up here, succeeded. Is everyone at least at that point?
Mine says that it's a build only device cannot be ran on this target.
Okay, when you select up top left here, select a simulator, so like iPhone 6, and then hit build. Then does it say build succeeded?
You click on.
There. Oop. Oh, don't want that. Here.
But I somehow just showed up like
I don't have a problem. I'll just look off of sharing screen. I don't want to hold up the class because I don't have those options.
Okay. Well, we'll go back here then. So now this is the finished storyboard. Same thing. A little bit different though, because the final version uses a what's called a stack view, so that you don't really have to do auto layout on those two buttons. We'll talk about that at the end, since we're kind of going to skip quite a bit here. When we left, we had the outlets for the 3 UI components that were in the view controller's view. And we can control them. We set the background to this when the view controller ran. What we need to do now is figure out how to get the action that when the user taps a button, something happens, right? And so the view controller has what's called an IB outlet, and that gives it the outlet to say to access the UI button and set the background. But we have to tell the button the action to complete back to the view controller so that the view controller can know that the button was tapped. If you look in the class for the view controller here, there are a couple actions. One is called button tapped. The other one, ugly button tapped, right? So what we're going to do is select a button and we'll go and kill, whoop, I didn't want to do that. The way you do this is the touch is actually a touch up inside, right? There's different formats of them. We won't be talking about the other versions of touches, but you drag from that to the view controller or over here if you can see it. And now what it does, what Xcode does is it looks through the view controller for all of the actions. And so since I had the Qt button selected, I want to select the Qt button tapped action. And we'll do the same thing if you select the no button and you kill the existing one there. We would tap there, touch up inside, hold the mouse button down, drag back over to the view controller, and then ugly button. Right? Now, how do you know that works? Well, you can do a number of things. Let's focus on the Qt button got tapped first, right? If that works, then the view controller will receive that message, and you're going to get something here. So you can do something like this, right? Or you can even use a breakpoint, which can make the execution stop, right? So build and run. Command R. I tap the Qt button, and what do I get? I get a breakpoint that's stopped there, which means that it hasn't ran this command yet. If I use the debugger and I let it skip one line, in the debugging console, I got it worked. A typical way to know things are working, it's one of those two things there. You can either litter your code with something did something. You can put, print all sorts of stuff to the console there. If you can avoid that, because you'll have boatloads and boatloads of output in this little window that after a few months of working on an app, you realize you don't need, and then you'll have to go back and delete to remove it all. Versus if you just use breakpoints, now I've done this and I know this works, so I don't need this anymore, and I can remove the breakpoint. If I ever don't know whether or not that worked again, I can put a breakpoint back, build and run, and it'll halt there. Let me undo some of this. So theoretically, we're at the point, if we hadn't skipped ahead with the master branch, we're at the point where you have your UI and both buttons are tappable. Great. What do you do with that? You would have buttons that tap, but you don't have any bunnies in the image view. You have one, but that's simply because you went in the image view inspector and gave it one here, right? You could do this and change it. What you really want, you want it to iterate through a series of buttons or a series of bunnies that as you select one or the other, it keeps track and does something with that information at the end. So what we have is a bunny provider class. And we have a representation of a bunny. And how you create a new class is basically you select where you want it in Xcode. You hit new, type Swift, and there you go. There's a new class, right? I just happened to do this one called Bunny Provider last night. It needs to know what a bunny is, right? In its simplest form, a bunny is an image. Yeah, you laugh, but it's true, right? Wait till you play the game. So we create a Swift struct that has the file name, right, for the image. And the images came in the assets with the git checkout. And when you create a struct like that, or any kind of model, you always want to put a description because it can help with your debugging. So the bunny provider class provides bunnies. We know that that there is a finite list of bunnies because we know the images, bunny 1 through bunny 8. So when the bunny provider class fires up and is initialized, we go and we create 8 instances of bunnies. And then we create an array here of bunnies. And then add the bunnies to the array. Simple enough. So now the bunny provider could be asked, give me a next bunny, right? And if the view controller, when it fires up, can ask the bunny provider, hey, give me a bunny image, then it can take that image and put it in the image view. And then as you tap the buttons, it says, all right, give me the next image, give me the next image, and you get an image rotation. Does that make sense? Seeing nods. Nobody asleep yet? Cool. All right. So for now, I was going to type all this out, and I don't think you want to watch me type. There's a helper function here called next bunny image, and all it does is figure out what the next bunny image is to provide. How would you do that? Well, at startup, you always want to start out with the first bunny. So you know that you need some sort of counter to do that. This is your counter. Next provided at index is an integer, and it starts out at 0, right? So bunny provider gets initialized. That's 0. It get asked. The view controller ends up asking it, give me the next bunny image, and boom. If it's greater, if the index is greater than the number of bunnies in the array, then return nothing, right? Otherwise, go and try to grab the next bunny at that index. And you do this with the guard statement. The guard statement is basically, you can have a lot of if, then, else's. I don't know how much programming you guys have done. Swift has a neat little guard statement that you give it the criteria at the beginning, and you can tell it else, do something. So we try to get a valid bunny out of the bunnies array, and then try to get the file name from the bunny, because maybe we typoed this, right? If we did, then this guard would fail, and who's ever asking for the next bunny image, which in our case is the view controller, would fail because there's no image or no file name. And if we have a file name, then we can go and actually get the image, the proper matching image out of the assets, right? Once we have all of those three, and we have the image, then we know we're good to increment the bunny count for the next time we're asked, and then we return the image. Now, so you've got a class that'll do all that for you, but the view controller doesn't know how to use it. So what you create is a instance variable of the bunny provider, right? And you make it lazy load in Swift so that it only gets initialized when it's needed, which means which would help you be more performant in RAM use because you're on a mobile phone and you don't want to, max out the RAM. You do that, your bunny provider is initialized when it's asked for, so when this thing fires up, the view controller would view did load, and then the view controller will appear, and we have a helper function here called show first bunny. What does show first bunny do? Show first bunny asks the bunny provider for the next bunny image, and then if the guard statement passes, we know that we have an image, and we can tell the bunny image view, here's the new image, right? You technically don't need this method. Technically, you could do something like this back here, right? But a lot of times, iOS view controllers can get huge, and the view will appear. You have so many things coming in and trying to get set up in the view did load, view will appear, view did appear methods, that it's design-wise, it's better if you have smaller functions and methods. You'll save yourself time. So now you're at the point that this will load and you can get a first image. But if you tap these, really nothing will happen, right? You tap Qt and this message will get sent to the view controller. What you need is something to keep track of what they tapped on and then tell the image view to get a new or an updated bunny image, right? So we end up with another Swift class called scorekeeper. This is really, really simple. You want to keep track of how many votes, positive or negative, they did. And you name it positive or negative because you don't know necessarily what your app's 2 buttons are going to be titled, right? You could say up, down, you could say yay, nay, but the intent is still the same, positive or negative, you're voting. So you create 2 integers in the scorekeeper class, and you set those to zeros to begin with. And as someone votes, let's say they tap the Q button, the view controller is going to tell the scorekeeper to upvote or downvote, right? And then you've got a helper method here that, and these don't return anything, they just increase the value. But the last function down there, the score, it returns the positive and negative votes, right? So you can do something like at the end after they're done voting. That's great. You've got something that can manage the score, but you need to tell it to upvote when tapped, right? And you need to tell it to downvote. How do you do that? You create an instance variable of the scorekeeper inside the view controller. And same thing, that's lazily initialized so that once it's created, you tap the button and the scorekeeper is told to upvote. And really, when you're looking at this and if you're not sure what upvote does, you can always command tap it and it goes straight to it. And that's where you can say, oh, okay, it increased the positive votes. Super simple. So at this point, you have the scorekeeper, you have the scoring mechanism down, but you still need, and you have a show first bunny, but you have no way to get the next bunny. And you need to get the next bunnies 1 to n, right? So you have a nice little helper function here called show next bunny. And after the tap, show next bunny. Show next bunny, all it's going to do is ask the bunny provider, give me the next bunny. It uses the next bunny image function off of it, and then tells the view controller, if it gets one, then show the next bunny. And it just iterates through that over and over until you run out of bunnies. And when you run out of bunnies, then the show next bunny function would fail, and that would do this method called show results. All right? Show results, the idea is that it just puts up an alert that says, hey, here's how you voted. It gets remember the scorekeeper can return the score. So it gets the upvotes and downvotes. It creates just a text title. It creates a message that you voted positive and negative, and then puts up an alert on the screen. Let's give it a shot. All right, cute, cute. And just for the heck of it, we'll even put a breakpoint there. Shh. Breakpoint hit. let it continue, and there's your alert. Now you have a problem in that, where does the user go? There's no button on the alert. That's because we create a button here, and just for the heck of it, I commented it out. So you give the alert an action, and that would hide bunny, and then you add the action to the alert, and then when you run that again, you'll see a button there that says, what does it say? Results. And then you can dismiss the alert, and then you let the user, I don't know, do another round, go post on Twitter for them that, they inaccurately said that a cat was a cute bunny. Take your pick, right? And that is the extent of the app. Did all of that make sense? Any questions yet? Yeah.
So you have these methods, these several methods. One provide and they communicate with the view controller. Is that like the model view?
So you're asking how the provider or the scorekeeper communicate with the view controller?
I mean, like in terms of the model view controller. Is it like how it works? Like you have this action, you have this method, this function. Communicating with the view controller, the view controller is using them to
Kind of. You have the view controller, and it manages the UI bits through its view, right? So the image view and the buttons in this case. But the view controller doesn't really have any of the. You don't want it to be responsible for providing the bunnies, and you definitely don't want it to be responsible to manage the scorekeeping. So that's why you have these two separate classes, right? And the view controller just goes and says, okay, I know that I need a bunny provider because I need to ask it for the bunnies, and then I need something that's going to manage the score. And it does that with two instance variables, each of these. There would be what? What do you mean by composition? Yeah. And a matter of fact, if any of you have done anything like this, a common pattern is if you had a second view controller here, that you had a button here. Let's say you had an info button on here, right? And that was going to show and you wanted to show a view controller called info. So you tap that info button. What would happen is you would drag from the one view controller or from that button to the other view controller and select show, right? But in the meantime, maybe you wanted to know the score. You would have the one view controller in its prepare for seg give its scorekeeper to the next view controller. Does that make sense? And that's where you get I think that's what you're asking. Okay. I mean, at the end, if we got time, we can mess with that if you'd like. Anybody else?
Is it accurate to say that the UI view controller is like an interface, and then your controller implements that interface?
The view controller is the class or the object that manages its own view and maybe other views, right? So this is your class we inherited from the UI kit view controller. And, And this is, if you look, there's the view controller, but there's its view.
Okay, so the colon in Swift, that's inherits.
Yeah, this is the parent class, and that's and now in Swift you can, if you look at this a lot of times, you'll see something like score keeper data source. Those would be protocols, right? Or sometimes you'll see something like in another class you'll see a extension. Right? And that's where you'll give protocols to a class, or just extend a class's functionality. But colon. That help?
Yeah.
Okay. Can any of you build and run this? Yay? Nay? If you grab the master branch, you should be able to, especially if you do something like that.
One question while we are waiting.
Yeah.
Switching from Objective-C to Swift, is it like question one, Swift is literally replacing Objective-C in the sense that you don't need to learn anything about Objective-C. Two, in Objective-C there's a .m and .h file, but now in Swift there's only one Swift file, right? So it's really just one file. Is that the proper?
Yeah. I don't know that you can say that Objective-C has replaced Swift. Definitely not yet. If you're doing a new app just for yourself, I would suggest you go after it with Swift. If you're looking to get a full-time job doing iOS development, you need to learn both. And even so, you need to at least minimally, even for your own stuff, be familiar with Objective-C, because there's still a lot of open source projects out there that may not work, or you want to extend, a pull request, all that. So if you're not minimally familiar with it, I mean, Swift is based on the Objective-C runtime anyway. But yeah, the Objective-C, you had a header file and an implementation file. You don't have that with Swift. Swift is a little bit, it's a lighter in that regard, that you don't need the header. And in fact, if you end up making like a framework or anything, then Swift will create the headers for you. So if you, let's say, if you looked at a method for this, you would see that its comments. So like provides the next, right? When Xcode, or when the compiler makes your header file, you'll see that. And the similar representation of that is if you go here and you look at this, right? If I go and I open UI view, controller.h, notice the header file, right? It loads. There you go. You still have header files, but Swift doesn't necessarily need them like Objective-C slightly does.
Quick question. When you run this project, is it running the tests? And what would happen if one of the tests failed?
No, we'll get that in a second. So build success, anyone? Yeah? Are you able to build it and run it on your device?
No.
You got to try that. Try that while we go over the unit tests. Does anyone know the difference between logical and acceptance or UI tests? Anyone? Take a guess? Does anyone know the difference between logical and acceptance tests.
Acceptance tests for testing the functionality of the app. So maybe like a user being able to click something.
Very good. All right. What we've got set up with this, two different test suites. One is logical. The other one is UI. And if you start a new Xcode project with an up-to-date Xcode, it will let you create both of these so you don't even have to set them up by hand anymore. What this looks like, though, in reality, is for the logical tests, there's not really that much to this app, so I struggle a little bit in trying to figure out what we could test. What I came up with is we can test the bunny provider, right? It's our own class, we made it, and in order for the app to function, we know that it has to provide bunnies. So in the logical tests, we let the first test create an instance of a bunny provider, and then we ask the bunny provider, we verify that it has more than 0 bunnies, right? And if you remember, when the bunny provider first initialized itself, it created that static array. So as long as we didn't five-finger any of these, this test should pass. And for the heck of it, then you can go and you can say, all right, well, I'll do this a little bit further, and I'll create another instance of the bunnies, and I will check my bunny file names. Now, we could have also went with these bunnies and done a better job. Instead of having strings, we could have changed these to an enum. There's all sorts of swiftiness there that's a little bit more advanced. For this example, we don't need it. But we can write tests that verify that we didn't misspell or misname the bunny, because capitalization counts here. So those two tests, super simple, but it gives us a start at testing our logical functionality. When we would build and run tests, though, it's going to want to run these tests, any tests that we have created in the test target, and then it's also going to want to run the UI tests. The UI test target, and when I say target, it's these, right? There's the main app target, there's the logical unit test target, and there's the UI test target. So if I go over here and I look at the tests that are in there, all the tests inherit from a class. Notice the inheritance, XC test. You get standard setup methods and whatnot. But then we have this, and it's called test example. If you try to read it, it looks like it taps on cute, it finds the cute button and it taps it, and then it finds the May button, taps it, and taps buttons, and then tries to verify the results. Now, how did I write that? Truth be told, I did not write it. This is slick, but you got to watch. I'm going to delete all that out. And down here at the very bottom, oh, you can't see it. Let me move this up. At the very bottom of the screen is a little red button. That'll record. And what it does, it tells Xcode to take that test target and use your applications bundle as the app that it's going to run within it, and then lets you record actions. So let's give it a shot. Click 1. It found the button that I clicked, or tapped, sorry. Records the tap, keeps going through. Oh, never did remove that breakpoint. Sees the results, records my tap, done, right? Now, what does that really give you? Well, it saves you a boatload of time if you go and hit Command U. Because when you hit Command U in Xcode, it's going to try to run all of your tests. So it's going to first run the logical test target, which it already did there, and then it's going to run that UI test target, and it's going to do those exact same actions. And if all the tests pass, which you can watch in the little display here, if everything's green, then it's good. Finished running, we're good. This lets you refactor code and then run your tests. And if your tests pass, you know that your changes didn't break anything. If your tests fail, well, then you've got more work to do.
Did you make a test fail? And then show what happens?
A UI test?
Sure.
Okay. Note, what this is going to do, it's going to try to instantiate a button that points to a button called foo, which we obviously don't have, right? Oh, my bad. What did I do wrong? Bingo. It caught. Now, at this point, you've got a number of options. The test breaks. If you were running it in any kind of Xcode server or CI system, your build would break, and maybe you've got a build light that goes red and screams. For us here, we just know that the test broke, and we need to go and fix it.
So are there like different methods for like every possible user action? Like there's like, you just showed a tap, is there like swipe right, swipe left?
There are some. This whole UI testing is new for Xcode, especially with working in Swift. So there are a lot of the methods that you need, but they're not all there. You do the best you can. There's third-party frameworks. Before Apple added this in Xcode 7, there was a project called KIF that everyone used to use, and that would let you write your tests in Objective-C or Swift.
Okay, so you only use this for tests. So for all the user interaction in the app itself, is that all pretty much handled with that, what's it called, the WYSIWYG thing?
Interface builder?
Yeah.
It can be. It doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, you can write an app without using storyboards. You can write an app partially using storyboards, partially not.
But all the like user interaction with the app, like the events, like tapping, touching, stuff like that, that's all handled from the storyboard view for the most part?
Generally, it's handled by the view controller that owns the views, right? Now, if you were doing a larger app, you might have a class, depending on how you decide to architect out your app and what kind of design patterns you'd want. You might have one class that you would call like the application manager or something, right? That might handle the user flow or the navigation stack. Or you might just do it all through storyboards, because like I was saying, you can do something like this. Where's it at? you can drag another view controller on here, right? And then you could take a button. Oop. Yeah, okay. Change that to info, what dark, let's say, right? And then if you click and drag to it, show. So now, if we build and run, oh, where's it at? It doesn't know how to, we'll cheat. We'll stick it over here. There, that goes to the new view controller. Now, how you would get your user back, that's a whole nother problem in and of itself, right? A lot of times you would embed everything in a navigation controller.
I guess I was kind of curious, like, so was there a point where you said the action on the button is like a tap? Versus like, what if you wanted to make it like you hold the button for?
You could use a gesture control.
Okay.
If you attached a gesture to a button, let's say, there are different types of gestures. There's tap, there's pinch and zoom. But the tap, you can tell it length of tap. You can tell it the number of taps.
Does everything just default to tap then, if you don't set it otherwise?
I think because you dragged a button value has tap as default. I don't know if there are other type of controllers that don't have tap.
Well, there's a whole UI control class. I mean, you can make your own controls too. If you go tap a button there, and then you look at what you can inspect on it. Whoop. Here's your standard events for a button. So, I mean, you can drag, you can go down. If you can't get the effect that you want with that, then you wouldn't necessarily use those standard outlets. Instead, what you would do is put a gesture recognizer on it. And you can make your own gesture recognizers even, although for the most part, Apple gives you, enough of a selection that for most things you're going to do, you can just use theirs. Any other questions? I got one thing. Yeah.
Where you had the test example,
Mm-hmm. This one or that one?
in the bunny.py test,
This.
so that function, it like creates the test while you're using it.
Yeah, well, you can write those tests yourself, but the beauty of that record button is that it will try to write them for you. Because then you, in theory, could have someone who doesn't do as much development go and create these tests just by hitting that button and going through the part of your app that you want tests for. Does that make sense? Can you speak up, as I can't hear you too far away?
Is it in like, let's say, automated test?
Yes, yeah. If you can, with Xcode, you can attach to Xcode server. You can also run something like Jenkins for CI, and you can tell it to, if you use XC run, you could do XC run, Xcode, build, what is it? Workspace, scheme, what's this thing called? Bunny Love. I think this will do it. It's something like that, where you would tell it the workspace and then scheme to run and then build and test, and it assuming you've got the Xcode project wired up with those targets that it came with, it will run those tests for you.
So the test example function, the setup, they are all from the XC test case.
Yeah.
Would you call that record reporting?
The recording mechanism? It's just, it lets you record, we call them UI tests, I guess is the basic name for it. Because what you can do is, you don't necessarily want one method here to maybe run through your app, but you can use different test functions there to test different parts. Because when you do that, then, like if I want to just run this one test, I can tap here and run it. That way, if you have a suite of tests that take 2 hours to run and you're only working on one, I can just rerun this one over and over until it passes, and then I know my code's complete. Any other questions? All right, the last thing I'll show you, which we just kind of ran out of time with. If you look at the view controller where it shows the bunnies, I stuck in a few methods here, show an animated bunny and show an animated bunny with spring. When we were first talking with the first really simple example and we were talking about a UI view animation, this is what that does. You've got a simple one here that, and actually we can take these out. You've got a simple one that shows an animated bunny, and then you've got a little bit more complicated one that has spring and damping. And all it does is it takes the backing layer. Where's that at? It takes the backing layer on the bunny image and scales it to real small, right? And then when it animates in, or I'm sorry, it takes the existing bunny, goes really small, and then when it completes, then it goes and removes that transform by telling the bunny image that it needs to go back to the identity, and that makes the bunny image go back to its normal size. And when you run it, that's that, right? I would encourage you to grab that project and play with the scaling numbers in there, play with the timings. When you're in the simulator, you can, if you have the simulator selected, can you see that? When you're in debug mode, you can turn the animations on and slow them down. So it lets you really see what you're trying to do and whether you're getting the right effect or not. Because sometimes if you try to run them in real time, it's too fast. And you think, oh, it's good enough, but then you realize that you didn't get something quite right. And if you go in here, you can comment them out even. And I think there's show. Yeah. So if you wanted to see it without the, oh, that's not going to work. Why? Anybody see what I did wrong? If I took out the animated intros for the bunnies, and I'm just telling it to show next bunny, it's just going to do that over and over and over, right? Basically an infinite loop. Not cool. But if I tell the bunny image views image to be the image of the next bunny, it should change the image there without any animation. A lot of iOS development has to do with images. A lot of it has to do with animations and timings and understanding the view system, the view hierarchy, how what a transform is. I know we didn't get into a lot of that, but as you're digging into this, that's kind of stuff that that's how you add the polish to your apps, and it's where you need to go. So after all that, we kind of jumped a little bit out of order. But I put up a list of where to go from here items. Apple has some halfway decent material on just starting that's similar to this. You can go to swift.org and grab the Swift books. There's a number of them that Apple has put out, or you can grab them through iBooks. They're all free. You should go to iTunes U in iTunes. Stanford has some online courses that are just phenomenal. They walk you through this, and they've been doing them for years, so they're clear, they're concise, and you'll learn a lot. We have a local meetup group similar to this, but it's devoted to iOS programming. We meet Tuesday nights. The next meeting is coming up here, I think the second Tuesday of April up at Polaris, or I'm sorry, not Polaris, Easton. So if you go to the meetup group, you can check it out and, stop on out. We do two types of meetings. One is more presentation based, and the other two are just kind of code hackathons. People show up when they're trying to write something, and you get help, or just hang out, drink beer, whatever. The last thing is a big link to Apple's developer resources, and that's just everything. If you really get into this, you'll spend the next year reading, and you'll be reading a lot. The frameworks for Apple or Androids or .NET systems are gigantic. It's just a lot to learn. But when you get it running and you get stuff running on your phones, which I was hoping a lot of you could walk away with today, that's when it gets kind of cool, when you can actually see it. It's only recently that people could really, in an afternoon, run something on their own cell phone. Years ago, you couldn't. So I would suggest you hit some of these up, and if you keep going with it, stop by the meetup. And that's all I got. Yeah?
Question about your methods. If you're going to use an older iPhone that might not be as powerful for some of those animations, is there a way to limit down running those for certain phones?
Yes, you can. Well, you can do a number of things. You can do an iOS version check in your code. You can also try to differentiate the models. Ideally, you don't do that, but there are some cases, even aside from animations and the timings, because sometimes on an iPhone 6, let's say, you'll let an animation take a good minute because you can do all sorts of things. But on an iPhone 4, that same animation, it's like watching molasses draw. So you'll either try to cut down the time on the animation or cut out pieces or parts of it or cut it out entirely. You can do the same thing with auto layout. When you're moving the constraints, you'll have different constraints, and you may animate things in for an iPhone 6 because you've got all kinds of room, but on an iPhone 4, everything's jam-packed in that little UI, so you're not going to animate anything. They're just stock constraints that you're not going to change the values on.
Can you set that just on the builder then, like in Facebook?
You can. Well, here, I'll show you something real quick. I don't know how well it will show on the screen, but we'll try. In Interface Builder, if you go, where is it? View, Utilities. There's a preview window somewhere in here. Navigate. I know how to start it from a keyboard. If you hit Option, Command, Enter, you get the second window. Sorry, I don't know where it is in the menu. So now I'm looking at the Interface Builder for that UI, right? If I change it to preview mode, what it'll do, it will try to render that UI for that device that I've given it. So what I can do is down here with a little plus sign, I can go and add another one. And I don't know if it'll let me scroll or not. Maybe. Yeah, okay. So now if I've got UI bits, maybe text fields laid out all around here, and I've got my auto layout rules in place, then I can try to get a pretty good glimpse of how that will all fit there. It doesn't always work 100%, but generally it's fairly close. Does that help? Anything else?